Hey, what's happening, y'all? In some of my past videos, I, just kind of casually mentioned that I was using a DI box as part of my signal flow. Since then, I've received some offline questions from some friends and, my wife and just some people who aren't necessarily in the studio world about that particular piece of hardware. Specifically, they were asking, what are they? What are they for? Do I really even need a DI? If so, what kind should I get? And and some musicians had heard that I talked to had heard of a Reamp box, and so they're going, how is a DI box different from a Reamp box? Are they interchangeable? And a lot of this particular video is going to go through some basics just to leave as few knowledge gaps as possible. But we are going to do some test tones and listen to some different DI options. So if you're already well versed with these particular devices, you might want to check the chapters and skip to the parts that you want to hear. But anyways, I thought that these were some good questions to ask. So let's get some answers. You silly mutt. Okay, so this is a DI box, or a direct injection box. I still think direct injection sounds weird. It's like either a car part or a medical procedure. But it does kind of make sense when you consider the purpose of the device. The whole point of a DI box is to take a instrument level signal, say from a guitar or bass output jack, and get it to microphone level so that it can go into a mixing console or an audio interface or some sort of external preamp like you'd find in a channel strip or a 500 series preamp. Now, why is this important? So there are 4 different levels of audio signal. You've got microphone level, instrument level, line level, and speaker level. These levels refer to the voltage of the electric signal that's being sent down the cable. And the higher the voltage, the higher the level of the signal. So if you're still wondering what I mean by level, it really is addressed in electrical terms, but if you need, like, say, a perceivable equivalent, you might think of it like loudness. So the signal coming straight out of microphones is the lowest or the quietest, which is why you need a preamp to boost the signal to levels that are usable for pro audio, or line level. So line level is the level at which most audio hardware works together. Instrument level signals that come straight out of a guitar, bass, or keyboard output jack are somewhere in between mic level and line level. And DI boxes exist to adjust the voltage of an instrument level signal to mic level so that it will work well with microphone preamps. Some guitars, like my Les Paul over here, have extremely high output, and if I were to go straight into just a regular preamp at instrument level, it would be really hard to get a clean recording. So we've talked a bit about why DI boxes were invented in the first place. To get a instrument level signal and bring it down to mic level so it can go into a preamp. But you might be wondering why you would even want to send a guitar or a bass or a keyboard signal to, like, front of house or a recording console or an interface without an amp, without effects, and none of the stuff that makes it sound good, right? And that is where another benefit of using a DI box comes in. And that would be that right there. Let's get this up to the camera. The throughput jack. Okay, so this jack splits off your guitar signal before any voltage changes happen, so that at the same time that you're recording or mixing your dry tracks, or your dry signal, You can also record or mix a mic'd up amp or an amp direct output or something else like that. Okay, so for the demos that we're doing in this video, we are going to use my Lachlan bass. Bass is an instrument that it's very common to go DI on recordings or live. For bassists, a DI box is usually pretty much a necessity. And sometimes you'll use amp modelers, but in a lot of tunes, just honestly, a DI bass still just sounds great. This time around, we've got the Lachlan bass going into my Radial passive DI box over here, which we will take a look at here in a little bit. And from there, the throughput is going into my orange solid state bass amp over here, which is mic'd up with an AKG P170. Here is the mic'd up amp. And here is just the DI box. The cool thing with using that approach is that it gives you lots and lots of flexibility. So let's say you did a couple takes and then you comp together the perfect take, edit them, the different takes to get just the best versions of each little part. And then you're playing back and you hear a sudden shift in the middle of the track. Crap, the mic stand slipped mid-recording and you didn't hear it until it was too late, and now that the track is ruined and you've got to start all over again, well, not if you got a DI track. You can now add either an amp sim plugin to your DI track and rescue the recording, or you can send your newly edited DI guitar track out of your interface through a Reamp box like this one to your amp and record it again, and maybe even adjust your settings or your mic position to get an even better tone. So a Reamp box like this one from Radial, the Pro RMP Studio Reamper, is really just like a DI box. So where a DI box takes an instrument level signal and adjusts it to microphone level, a Reamp box takes a line level signal and adjusts it to instrument level. But they aren't interchangeable. That's an important thing to remember. So, because the voltages are different. So, running a signal from your interface through a DI in reverse isn't going to be the same as actually using a Reamp box. So, how I've got the DI box connected is I've got a TRS to XLR cable that's coming out of one of the outputs of my interface, and that plugs in to the input of my Reamp box, and then I've got a TS instrument output on that box. So what we can do is we're going to take this where that was connected to the throughput on the DI box, connect it to the output of the Reamp box, and let's see if we can adjust our mic position here and get a new bass tone. We've talked about what DI boxes are, the purpose they serve, but now the big question left is, what DI box do you need? If you look on Sweetwater, there's tons of different options out there, and it can look a little overwhelming. But if we break it down into some definable categories, it's really fairly simple to figure out exactly what you need. So the first category is going to be the number of channels. Most DI boxes are either mono or stereo. A mono DI box, like these two that I have here, and this is a Whirlwind Hotbox, active reference DI. It's got one input, one throughput, and one output. You use it on a mono source like guitar or bass, and then you have stereo DI boxes that are used for stereo sources like keyboards and synthesizers. There are some DI boxes that have more channels, but don't let that confuse you too much. If you look at them, they're really just collections of mono or stereo DI boxes, so that you can get a DI on multiple sources at the same time without having multiple boxes. The next category after that to discuss is active versus passive. So an active DI box is powered electronically, either through phantom power or a battery. This has a 9-volt battery in it. A passive DI box instead uses a transformer to get the job done, and it doesn't require external power. A common approach is that if you have a passive instrument, like the Ibanez or the Les Paul over here that have passive pickups in them, you go with a active DI box. Whereas if you have a instrument that is active, like the Lackland bass, or like my ESP LTD with the EMGs in it, then you would use a passive DI, like my Radial Pro DI here. Now, that being said, in truth, they both work for either type. I tend to just use the passive box. It works really well for me, whether I'm using the bass or the Les Paul or any of my instruments, really. It works. It works really well. I like the Hotbox. This one I actually built myself through a kit in audio school. But it's just kind of a common thing that you say, okay, well, active instruments through a passive DI, passive instruments through an active DI, but the only real rule in music is that it has to sound good. So if you have an opportunity to try out both, give it a shot and see what works best for the instrument that you're using. So while we're on the subject, let's take a listen to these two DI boxes back to back. The Hotbox also has some additional features on it, like it has a pad and it has a ground lift function. Sometimes with DIs, you can get some weird noise issues coming through on the ground pin. So they'll have, and this one has one too, where it says pin 1 lift or ground lift. And it's either a button or a toggle switch that basically just disconnects the ground pin and helps to eliminate any of that weird noise. So it's got the pad. You can either run this with the battery on or the battery off, or with the pad engaged. So I've kind of got some levels dialed in. So this is the Hotbox with the battery on, ground lift disabled. So that's the Hotbox. Let's switch back over to the Radial Pro DI. Now, the truth is that if you're looking to purchase a DI, at least to record with, you might not have to. Most audio interfaces now come with instrument inputs built into them. The only real downside to that is that there isn't a throughput, so you can't record an amp at the same time. But if you've got a limited amount of money to get equipment and you have to choose between like a DI and a Reamp box, you might actually go with the Reamp box. Then you can record direct in with the instrument input of your audio interface and just get good, clean, raw guitar tracks. And you can comp together your takes and then reamp your edited track and record your amp that way. Or just use an amp sim and on the DI track, at least to record with, so you kind of get the feeling of playing with an amp. Just make sure if you're going to reamp that you bypass all of your plugins on your DI track before doing so. I guess my only problem with that workflow is that I personally feel like playing through an amp has an effect on the player. If the player is hearing that thick, rich tone of a real amp in the room, they're going to play differently. And so much of producing a track and being an audio engineer or a producer or whatever your role is working with human psychology. And if the player plays better and gets a better recording with more feeling with an amp sim or a real amp, regardless of what gets them to play better, if they play better, the whole song's going to be better. So that doesn't mean that other workflows or using modelers aren't valid, because they can sound just as good or better than a real amp. You've just got to take the time to see what's going to get the best performance for that particular musician. And since we're talking about the instrument inputs on an audio interface, let's go ahead and check one of those out. So I have gone straight into input 1 of my Scarlett 18920 with an instrument cable from the bass, and then hit the button to say that it is a instrument signal rather than a line level signal. So let's hear what that sounds like. Okay, so that's what that particular input sounds like. But that being said, each instrument input on the different interfaces, they're all going to sound different. So just to give an example of that, let's see what the same bass sounds like plugged directly into my Mbox that I've got feeding OBS. The last of these that I actually have available to see about difference in tone is the one that's built into the voice channel. Now the voice channel is a tube preamp. It's got compressors and de-esser and an EQ. Most of that is bypassed right now because I'm using it for this dialogue, but it does have an instrument input. So let's see what it sounds like. Alrighty, that's probably enough for this video. A lot of info in one blast here, but I hope it helped. Some of it's pretty basic, but hopefully there were a few nuggets in there for everybody. And if not, maybe at least the sound samples and experiments were useful. I don't know. But anyway, let me know your thoughts. Leave a comment below, especially if you have any questions, or maybe if you have some insights that could come in handy for other subscribers. Links will be in the description to the website, the merch store, and to the gear used in this video. So make sure to like this video and subscribe. Thanks so much for hanging out with me here, and I appreciate you. You're awesome, and have a good one.